They said, "Oh, fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving." So I did. I packed light, just my cardigan, the old pie dish, and an envelope of emergency cash I'd saved for years. I flew 1,500 miles carrying more hope than luggage. But what I didn't bring with me was the silence, the kind that hums louder than engines, heavier than carry-ons. By the time I reached Gate 3A in Minneapolis, families were already reuniting, tears, balloons, babies in bear ear hoodies. And me? I stood still like a misplaced package someone forgot to claim. I checked my phone, no missed calls, just a photo, their smiles, their toast, their table, and a pie that wasn't mine. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a mix-up, it was a choice. I was brewing a pot of chamomile when the phone rang. Not a text, not a voicemail, a real call. I nearly dropped the mug from my hand. It was Caleb, my son, who never calls unless there's a bill, a birthday, or something broken. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice too sweet like he'd rehearsed it. "You doing anything for Thanksgiving?" I paused, heart already fluttering. "Nothing much," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just planning to roast a little chicken. Maybe bake if my wrists behave. Old movies and quiet." He hesitated on the line, just long enough to feel calculated. "Well," he said, "the kids were asking about you. Thought maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone's going to be together. It wouldn't feel right without you. It wouldn't feel right without me." God. I let those words fill the kitchen like steam. I let them settle into the cracks of old linoleum and behind cabinet doors that hadn't heard laughter in too long. It's been years since I felt truly wanted. Not needed. That's different. Not called upon to babysit or to wire emergency cash or to fill out FAFSA forms no one else understood. Wanted. There's a tenderness to that word, and a cruelty when it's missing. So I said yes. Yes, of course. I'd find a flight. I'd be there. He didn't offer to book it, didn't even ask about prices. And I didn't bring it up. I still had that envelope, the one I tucked away in a cookie tin marked Christmas, but labeled in my heart as just in case. This qualified. I didn't hang up right away. After we said our goodbyes, I held the phone against my cheek, just listening to the silence. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt excited. Not useful, not obligated, just included. That night, I took out my little floral suitcase, the same one I'd used for Emma's graduation years ago, and set it on the bed like a promise. I opened the closet, pulled out the navy cardigan, the one that fit right at the hips and didn't itch at the neck. I pressed it flat, folded it carefully, as if presentation still mattered. Then came the pie dish, glass, heavy, seasoned with years of butter and cinnamon. I wrapped it in towels, tucked it between soft things, the way I used to tuck in Caleb when he was small. I paused at my dresser. There, in the top drawer, beneath socks and scarves, sat the stack of emails, printed out, yellowing at the corners. Subject lines like Thanksgiving plans, dinner our place, bring whatever, or sometimes just a forward of a group thread I was never added to in the first place. No one ever said the words. No one ever called. Not until now. Maybe that's why I kept them. Proof that I hadn't imagined the distance, that I wasn't just being sensitive. There was the year they assumed I was going to Vegas with the church ladies. The time they told me last minute that dinner had moved up a day. After it happened? One time, Caleb sent a gif of a turkey wearing sunglasses with "Happy Tea Gives, Mom" as the full message. I responded with a thumbs up emoji. Then I cried into my stovetop stuffing mix. But this year was different. This year, he called. He said the kids were asking, that it wouldn't feel right without me. I packed 2 books for the grandkids, a small box of truffles for Meline, even though I wasn't sure she still liked dark chocolate, and I bought myself a new pair of shoes with a little heel. Not too high. Just enough to feel like the kind of woman who's invited. I checked the weather in Boston. I arranged for the neighbor boy to take out my trash. I didn't tell my bridge group, didn't want to jinx it. This time felt hopeful. It had been so long since someone said, "Come, we want you here." And I let myself believe it. The plane landed 5 minutes ahead of schedule. I remember that because it felt like a good omen. The kind of tiny miracle I didn't want to say out loud in case I scared it away. I gathered my things slowly, my coat folded just so, the pie dish tucked safely between my clothes, the envelope of emergency money still zipped inside the lining of my bag. I even smoothed my skirt and adjusted my cardigan before stepping off. I wanted to look like someone who mattered, someone worth showing up for. The terminal was alive with motion. Families clustered around arrival boards, children in pajamas clinging to parents, couples locking eyes and rushing into each other's arms. It was Thanksgiving Day, after all. I moved toward Gate 3A, suitcase wheels humming softly behind me. My heart was full, tired, yes, but expectant. I stood just under the arrival sign, like we'd planned. Beneath the sign with the airplane logo, outside door B, the place we always met. And then I waited. At first, I didn't notice the time. The terminal was too noisy, too full of greetings and laughter and the chaos of reunions. I told myself they were probably circling the lot, that the traffic was bad, that maybe the kids had to pee, but 20 minutes passed, then 35. At 42 minutes, I checked again. The flight had landed. I had texted them before boarding. Flight arrives 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. No reply, but Malene had texted the day before. We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you. I read that message again, then again, trying to find something I'd missed. They said, "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving." So I did, but there I was, standing still while people around me were claimed like treasured packages. A little girl in a purple coat screamed, "Grandma," and ran into an old woman's arms right beside me. A man in a flannel shirt handed his mom a bouquet of gas station flowers and whispered, "Sorry, we're late." Another family held up a sign that said, "Welcome home, Jess." And me? I stood there with my coat folded over one arm, my suitcase upright beside me, the pie I'd imagined us sharing still packed and waiting. I didn't sit down. Something about sitting felt like defeat, as if the moment I lowered myself to the bench, I would become the very thing I feared, a woman left behind. Instead, I stood like a misplaced package. Not damaged, not returned, just unclaimed. My phone buzzed, not a call, not a message, a notification, social media. I hesitated, then opened the app. And there they were. Caleb in the navy sweater I gave him last Christmas. Malene, smiling wide, her arms around Ruby and Jack, the dining room bathed in warm light behind them. Candles, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, a golden turkey, a pie, not mine. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts, happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." There was no mistake. No empty chair. No space left for me in that frame. That's when I stopped checking the time. That's when I knew this wasn't a delay. It was a decision. I didn't cry. Not there. Not yet. Instead, I pulled my coat on with quiet, deliberate motions and walked out through the sliding glass doors, past the rows of shuttles and taxis, past the giant inflatable turkey someone had taped to a rental van, past a family sharing leftover pie on the hood of their car. The wind outside was sharper than before. It found the space between my collar and neck and slid in like it belonged there. I wasn't angry, not then, but something was shifting. I wasn't waiting anymore, and that was the difference. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I was just trying to feel close to them. Maybe I needed a distraction. Either way, I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook, not expecting much. Maybe a weather update or a memory from last year. But there it was. The photo. At first, it took me a second to even recognize them. The lighting was soft, golden, like it came from a magazine. Caleb was at the head of the table wearing the navy sweater I sent last Christmas. Rachel looked beautiful as always, smiling, tanned, a glass of wine in hand. Ruby and Jack were leaning over the table, reaching for something, their faces lit up with joy. The table was full. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, and a pecan pie that wasn't mine. Above the photo was the caption, "Full house, full hearts, happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I read it again, and again. My eyes searched every inch of that frame. I looked for an empty chair, a plate waiting to be filled, a hint that they were saving a place for me. There wasn't one. They were all there, without me, together, smiling. The sting wasn't loud or sharp. It was soft, quiet, the kind of pain that just sits heavy in your chest and refuses to move. I don't remember what I felt first. Sadness, shame, anger. Probably all three, tangled up in a knot I couldn't pull apart. I had flown across the country for this. I'd packed my best cardigan, my pie dish, and the emergency envelope of cash no one knew I still kept. I told my bridge group I wouldn't be at Thursday's game. I'd baked cookies for the kids. I'd checked the flight time 3 times. I came because they asked me to, because I wanted to. And yet, there they were, eating dinner, toasting, celebrating, without me. I slipped the phone back into my purse and stood up. I didn't even notice how cold it had gotten until that moment. The warmth from inside the airport felt like it belonged to someone else. My coat felt thinner, the weight of my suitcase heavier. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not at the terminal, not waiting. So I walked. Not because I had a plan, just because I needed to move. One step, then another. It was something I could control. Outside, the world was going on. Families bundled into cars, kids bounced excitedly around luggage. People laughed and shouted names. I walked past it all like a ghost. I passed a woman who was hugging what looked like her mother-in-law, handing her a paper cup of hot chocolate. The older woman smiled, her face soft and happy. I wondered if she had made the pie. I walked further, past the parking lot, past the rental car booths. The cold bit through my gloves, but I kept going. I didn't know where I was heading. I just knew I couldn't turn back. Somewhere along that walk, something in me settled. Not in a peaceful way, but in the way you settle into a chair after standing too long. Tired, numb. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to leave me out. And that was worse. Still, I kept walking, not because I was strong, but because standing still felt unbearable. And maybe, deep down, I hoped that somewhere along the road I'd find a place that didn't ask me to wait for love that never came. The wind was sharp by the time I reached the edge of the airport district. My suitcase clattered behind me like an old companion too tired to argue. Just when I started to wonder if I'd have to sit down on the curb and cry, I saw it. A squat building with fogged-up windows and a flickering neon sign. Tina's Diner. The eye in Tina blinked like it couldn't decide whether to stay or go. Inside, the diner smelled of hot grease, cinnamon, and coffee that had been brewing since sunrise. The booths were vinyl, the floors slightly sticky, and the napkin dispensers older than my grandkids. But it was warm. And it was open. A young woman with a tired ponytail looked up from behind the counter. Her name tag read Cassie. "Happy Thanksgiving, hun," she said with a small smile. I hesitated. I must have looked like a woman who had nowhere else to be, because her smile softened and she nodded toward an empty booth by the window. "Sit anywhere you like." I slid into the seat, my coat still wrapped around me like armor. My suitcase rested beside me like a loyal dog. Cassie came over with a laminated menu. "Kitchen's slow today, but we've got turkey, mashed potatoes, and 3 kinds of pie." I looked up at her. She couldn't have been more than 25 or 26, with the kind of exhaustion in her eyes that doesn't come from work alone. "What kinds?" I asked. "Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime?" "Pumpkin," I said. "And some tea, please." She smiled. "Good choice." As she walked away, I glanced around. A man in a UPS jacket sat alone at the counter, poking at his turkey with a fork. An older couple shared a plate of mashed potatoes, speaking in low voices. The radio played a jazz rendition of A Christmas Carol. My phone vibrated. I didn't flip it over. When Cassie brought the pie, she placed it gently in front of me. Warm, soft, topped with a dollop of whipped cream leaning just a little to the side. "Need anything else?" I shook my head. She hovered a moment longer. "You okay?" she asked quietly, not prying, just offering. I looked at her, really looked. She wore off-brand sneakers, one lace frayed. Her hands bore faint grease stains. Her face, though young, carried the kind of weariness that comes from juggling too much with too little. "Are you?" I asked. She blinked, then gave a little laugh. "Fair enough." I took a bite of the pie. It was good. Not perfect, but warm and real. Not store-bought. Made by someone who cared enough to spice the filling and brown the crust. "I don't think I've ever eaten pie on Thanksgiving that I didn't make myself," I said. Cassie smiled. "Then you deserve it." "Maybe I do." She looked like she wanted to say more. Then, as if a decision clicked into place, she slid into the booth across from me. "My kid's with my mom today," she said softly. "She doesn't really like me bringing her to the diner. Says it's no place for a child." I nodded. "And yet, you're here? Working? On a holiday?" She shrugged. "Tips are better on days when people feel guilty." I let out a dry laugh. I know that feeling. Cassie studied me. They didn't show up, did they? No, I said. They posted a photo instead. She nodded like she understood all too well. I once took a bus 3 hours on Christmas morning to see my dad. She said. He forgot I was coming. Said he thought it was the weekend after. Did you stay? I asked. No, I walked to a diner, sat right where you are, ordered pie. I smiled. Maybe this booth is for the forgotten. Or the free, she said. That made something in me loosen. I looked at the slice again. The whipped cream had begun to melt slightly, running like soft snow into the crust, and I realized this was the first time I'd ever eaten pie for myself. Not to impress, not to host, not to please anyone else. For me, it tasted like something I'd earned. Cassie stood. You want another slice for later? I considered it. Yes, I said. For later, she winked. Best decision you'll make today. Maybe it was. As I stepped back into the cold, a little white paper bag swinging from my hand, I felt something unexpected. Not joy, not sadness, just this quiet strength. Because maybe the first place I truly belonged that day was Tina's diner. By the time I stepped out of Tina's diner, the light had shifted into that brittle November blue that makes everything look colder than it already is. The wind slipped under my collar and made my eyes sting. My little white paper bag with the extra slice of pie swung against my knee as I walked. I had no plan, no hotel booked, no family waiting, just the road and the hum of my suitcase wheels trailing behind me. I remembered seeing a sign from the taxi lane earlier in the day, Valley Inn, weekly rates available. It sounded tired but honest, and that was more than I needed. I turned toward it, my shoes clicking on the sidewalk, each step a small declaration. Forward, forward, forward. The Valley Inn sat low against the sky, a squat beige building with peeling paint and a vending machine glowing faintly by the front door. The lobby smelled of coffee left too long on a burner and industrial cleaner. A small TV perched on a shelf played a football game with the sound turned low. The man at the counter, gray sweatshirt, name tag that read Carl, didn't even glance up until I spoke. I need a room, I said. He slid a form toward me without looking away from the screen. Single or double? Single. He handed me a key attached to a flimsy ring. End of the row. That was it. No questions, no judgment, just a transaction. In a strange way, it felt like a relief. Room 114 had 2 mismatched lamps and a bedspread patterned in muted browns. The heater wheezed like an old dog but worked. The bathroom was clean enough. It wasn't inviting, but it didn't lie either. I set my suitcase down by the dresser, unzipped it, then stopped. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from everything I hadn't let myself feel at the airport. I sat on the edge of the bed and peeled off my shoes. My feet ached, my back ached, but what surprised me most was how intact my heart felt. Bruised, yes, but steady, clear. My phone buzzed, a message from Caleb. Hey, Mom, just realized there might have been some confusion. Thought your flight was tomorrow. Hope you're okay. Love you. I read it twice. The words felt thin, like air let out of a balloon. No apology, no urgency, just a little flick of blame, as though I'd miscalculated my own arrival, as though their Thanksgiving dinner had accidentally happened without me. I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into my suitcase and pulled out the small spiral notebook I'd packed for grocery lists and stray thoughts. I opened to a blank page, uncapped my pen, and wrote, I'm not a seasonal guest in my own life. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I underlined it. It wasn't elegant, but it was true. More true than anything that had passed between my son and me in years. For the first time that day, I didn't feel like I was waiting. I wasn't waiting to be picked up. I wasn't waiting to be forgiven. I wasn't waiting to be noticed. I set the notebook on. The nightstand, lay back on the bedspread without changing clothes, and closed my eyes. The heater clanged softly. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Outside, the wind scraped against the siding. I held on to the sound of my own breathing. Slow, even. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt clear. Dolores opened the door to her home slowly, as if the silence inside might greet her with open arms or with a glare. It was neither. Just stillness. The kind that wraps around you like a thin blanket. There, but not warm. The floor creaked under her shoes. She didn't bother turning on the lights right away. The amber spill of late afternoon through the windows was enough. She set her suitcase by the door, took off her coat, and stood in her own entryway like a guest. For a long moment she did nothing. No TV, no radio, just the soft hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. She moved slowly, deliberately, into the living room, pausing at the mantel where the same photos had sat for years. Caleb at graduation, a younger Dolores with darker hair, the whole family once packed tight into a Christmas snapshot, smiling into a camera held by someone who no longer called. But her eyes didn't linger long there. She had come home not just to remember, but to reckon. She went to the cabinet near the dining table, the one labeled simply important. From it she pulled a large beige file box, heavier than she remembered. She carried it to the kitchen table, cleared a space with the flat of her hand, and sat. The box made a soft thud as it landed. Inside, everything was neatly filed. She had always kept records, just in case. Birth certificates, car titles, bank statements, insurance policies. But now she flipped past those until her fingers found the section labeled Caleb. She pulled it out, and the folder flopped open like a tired storybook. Pages slid out. Old checks, scanned receipts, handwritten notes. There was the down payment she'd helped with when Caleb and Rachel bought their first home, the tuition assistance for Ava's summer camp, the car repair invoice from 2016, grocery reimbursements, utility bills she'd covered. Little things, Caleb had said, just until we get through this month. Every month had needed just a little help. She leafed through them, not with anger, but with the kind of focus that comes from finality. Each paper a piece of evidence, not of wrongdoing, but of unbalanced love. Of a mother who had filled in every financial crack without asking why they kept appearing. Tucked between two statements was a card, a birthday card from Ava, sent 3 months earlier. The front was silly, an avocado doing a cartwheel, but inside the handwriting was careful and warm. Dear Grandma D, thank you for always listening to me, even when I ramble. Nursing school is hard, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. I miss your cornbread stuffing. Please don't forget how much I love you. You're my safe place. Love, Ava. Dolores read it 3 times. Then she reached for the thinner folder labeled Ava. It wasn't thick, just a few birthday cards, a photo from Ava's high school graduation, a note scribbled during a Thanksgiving years ago. Grandma, save me a seat next to you. And yet, the difference was immediate. Where the folder marked Caleb was heavy with obligations, Ava's was light with affection. She reached for her notebook and wrote a single line. I've been generous, but I haven't been seen. She looked again at the photo of Caleb on the mantel and wondered, not with bitterness, but with clarity, how many times she'd mistaken obligation for love. And then she looked at Ava's card again, at the line, You're my safe place. That, she thought, is what family should feel like. Not duty, not guilt, but safety. That night, Dolores lit a single candle on the kitchen table. She sat beside it, notebook open, and began writing a new list. This time, not of things given, but of what she would protect. Her time, her voice, her peace, and maybe, one day, her pie. The morning air was crisp, dry, the kind that bit gently at her cheeks but didn't sting. Dolores wore her thickest scarf not for warmth, but because it had deep pockets, and she liked the way it weighed around her shoulders like armor. She hadn't been inside the bank in over a year. Most things were done online now, but today wasn't a day for screens. Today she needed signatures, paper, and the kind of silence that only a carpeted lobby could hold. Good morning, Mrs. Mendez, said the young man at reception, blinking at his screen. How can we help you today? I'd like to review and suspend all my automatic payments, and I need to update my account access permissions. Her voice was steady. He paused, then gestured toward one of the glass-walled rooms. You'll want Natalie for that. Natalie looked like she always did. Soft blazer, neat hair, polite eyes. She stood when Dolores entered, extended a warm hand, and offered her that performative smile people reserve for the elderly. What can I do for you today? Dolores took her time sitting. She placed her purse on the table, then folded her gloves beside it. Finally, she looked up. I want to stop all automatic transfers to my son. Natalie blinked. Of course, I can help you with that. Everything, Dolores continued. Car payments, insurance support, tuition help for the kids. Stop it all. Natalie hesitated. Are you sure? You've had those set up for over a decade. Dolores nodded. I'm sure. As Natalie tapped on her keyboard, numbers and names floated across the screen, tiny digital echoes of the past. Caleb's mortgage top-ups, Ruby's orthodontist bills, a PTA donation in Rachel's name. Would you like to also revoke access? Caleb has power of attorney on your accounts. Yes, Dolores said without a pause. It's time. More typing. The clack of it was crisp, like scissors cutting thread. Natalie printed out a form, slid it across the desk. Dolores signed. This isn't always easy, Natalie said, her voice gentle. It's not supposed to be, Dolores replied, but it's necessary. They sat in quiet for a moment. I used to think love was a transaction, Dolores said finally. You give, they come around. But I've learned, giving doesn't guarantee being kept. Natalie didn't speak, just nodded. And I'm not doing this because I'm angry, Dolores added. I'm doing it because I'm done apologizing for asking to be remembered. Natalie printed another sheet confirming the cancellations, and Dolores reached for her pen again. The final stroke of ink felt like a curtain dropping. When it was all signed, Natalie hesitated. Would you like us to notify your son? Dolores shook her head. No, he'll notice soon enough. She stood, gathering her things with a grace that came not from age but from certainty. Natalie rose too, a little, slower, the paper still warm from the printer in her hand. Is there anything else? She asked. Dolores smiled, just barely. Yes, one thing. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the small notebook she carried. Flipping to a blank page, she wrote something quickly, tore it out, and placed it on the desk. Natalie picked it up. The handwriting was firm, clear. I no longer do things because someone expects them of me. And that was that. Dolores walked out into the bright morning light, the cold brushing her skin but not reaching her bones. Later that evening, she called the bank just to double-check. Not out of doubt, but because control, once reclaimed, needed to be held firmly. Natalie picked up, surprised. Everything's in place, Mrs. Mendez. She confirmed gently. You're all set. Good, Dolores replied. Just needed to hear it out loud. And when she hung up, the silence that followed no longer frightened her. It felt like space, like possibility. Dolores sat across from Mr. Altman in his old office, the same worn leather chairs and ticking wall clock from decades ago. He was the only lawyer she'd ever trusted, through her husband's will, Caleb's college loans, and every quiet signature in between. I want to revise my estate plan, she said calmly, and I want to create a trust. Everything I have, my house, my savings, my accounts, I want it to go to Ava. Mr. Altman didn't flinch. And Caleb? Remove him. Remove Rachel. They've had enough, more than enough. I want Ava to be the sole beneficiary and trustee. She doesn't even know I'm doing this, but she's the only one who's ever called me just to talk. He nodded, pulled out a yellow legal pad. Any special conditions? Dolores thought for a moment. She can use the funds for education, housing, medical emergencies, things that help her grow, but I retain control while I'm alive. Nothing moves unless I say so. Understood. He scribbled notes, flipping through her existing file. And power of attorney? She exhaled. Caleb had it. Revoke that too. Mr. Altman glanced up, searching her face for bitterness. He found only clarity. This isn't revenge, Dolores added softly. It's recognition. Love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. He didn't argue. For the next hour, they moved through assets, accounts, designations. Dolores was meticulous. She remembered every loan she'd co-signed, every time she'd transferred money without thanks. She recalled the Christmas gifts left unopened, the birthdays skipped, the invitations sent too late to matter. I want this to be airtight, she said. No backdoors, no claims, no second guessing. Ava gets everything, no one else. I'll prepare the drafts, Mr. Altman said, sliding the notes into a folder. Come back in 2 days to finalize. She nodded, stood, and shook his hand. It felt like the closing of one book and the first page of another. That night, Dolores returned home and laid the trust documents on her kitchen table. Her hands, once hesitant, moved with quiet resolve. She took out her notebook, the one she'd used for grocery lists, Ava's childhood anecdotes, and unsent letters, and began to write something new. It wasn't a letter of explanation or apology. It was a testament. To Ava, she wrote, this home, these savings, this trust, they are not your burden. They are your foundation. I give you these not to bind you, but to lift you. Because you never asked, only offered. And that, my darling girl, is love." She folded the note gently, tucked it into the envelope, and sealed it with her initials. Then she reached for an old photo album. Cracked leather spine, pages that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She turned to the pages with Ava's drawings, school photos, messy letters with reverse letters. There had been a time she thought love meant always saying yes. But now she saw it more clearly. Love meant knowing when to say enough, so that what remained could be given with truth. The next morning, Dolores stepped out into the crisp air, the trust letter in her purse, her steps steady. She passed the old church, the library, the small cafe where she once waited for a call that never came. This time, no call was needed. The legacy was hers to rewrite, and she had. The phone rang late Friday morning, cutting through the quiet of the house. Dolores didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. Something in her heart stirred, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. "Grandma?" The voice was shaky, breathless. "Ava, sweetheart." "I got your letter," Ava whispered, and then she was crying. Soft, stifled sobs that reached across the miles like a hand. "I didn't know. I had no idea what happened. I read it 3 times already. I missed you so much that day." Dolores sat down at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling just slightly as she clutched the receiver. "Oh, baby, I know. That means more to me than you'll ever know. I kept asking Dad where you were. He just said your plans changed. That you were tired. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. No, never. You've never made me feel anything but loved." There was silence then, the kind that didn't ache, the kind that held 2 people steady in the truth they finally shared. "Can I come visit this weekend?" Ava asked suddenly. "I've got a break from clinicals. I can take the train, Friday afternoon, same one I used to take." Dolores felt something unfurl inside her, something delicate and deep. "Of course. The guest room's ready. I'll be at the station." When the call ended, Dolores didn't move for a long time. Her hands rested lightly on the table, the receiver still warm. Then she got up and changed the sheets in the guest room, fluffed the pillows just so, and placed a small vase of fresh lilacs on the nightstand. Saturday arrived with skies the color of soft slate. Dolores bundled up in her warmest coat and stood waiting on the platform at the train station. The air smelled like diesel and old coffee. Around her, people moved with purpose, some with flowers, others with bags or nervous anticipation. Then she saw her. Ava stepped off the train in a worn hoodie and jeans, her curls tucked beneath a beanie. The moment their eyes met, Ava's face broke into the kind of smile that belonged only to the people who truly see you. She ran. Dolores braced herself and opened her arms, and Ava fell into them with the urgency of love long held back. "I'm here," Ava whispered into her coat. "I know," Dolores murmured back, her cheek resting on the crown of Ava's head. "And so am I." The ride home was quiet, filled with the kind of warmth that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. Ava glanced out the window as if to take in every turn, every tree, every porch light. Back at the house, she dropped her bag in the guest room and curled up on the couch like she'd never left. Dolores made tea. They sat together in the hush of a winter afternoon, their mugs warming their hands and their presence mending something invisible between them. They played chess later. Ava still remembered Dolores's traps. They laughed when she fell into one anyway. At dinner, Ava cooked, a simple pasta with spinach and garlic. Dolores grated cheese while they talked about nothing and everything, professors, patients, the cat, who wouldn't stop knocking over plants. Later that night, they watched an old movie, one they used to love. Halfway through, Ava turned to Dolores and said, "Grandma, I don't want to lose you." "You won't," Dolores said. "I can't promise forever, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere yet." That evening, Dolores did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled down the old recipe book Ava had once asked about, the one with chocolate stains and notes in the margins. Flipping through its worn pages, she found the apple crisp recipe Ava loved as a child. She set it on the counter, not to bake tonight, but just to see it again. It reminded her of days when Ava would sit on the kitchen floor, drawing on napkins while Dolores chopped apples. Of sticky fingers, soft jazz on the radio, and stories shared without fear of judgment. Back in the living room, she picked up the photo again. The one of them. baby and grandmother, cheeks touching. Ava had once called her my safe place. Dolores whispered the words aloud now, as if to remind herself. I was her safe place, and she's mine too. She looked around the room. Nothing extravagant, just her space. A haven built not from what others gave her, but from what she refused to give away anymore. Her voice, her peace, her worth. Later that night, as the wind whispered outside and the house settled into sleep, Dolores stood at the window and watched snow begin to fall. She didn't feel forgotten. She didn't feel old or small or spare. She felt seen. And that, she thought, was more than enough. The knock came just after noon. 3 short raps, hesitant but rehearsed. Dolores wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door. There stood Rachel, hair smooth, eyes alert, lips painted the color of restraint. She wore her coat open over a cashmere sweater and held a canvas tote like a peace offering. Behind her, the winter sun cast no warmth. Hi, Rachel said, voice tight. I thought maybe we could talk. Dolores didn't move. About what? Rachel shifted. Thanksgiving. Everything. I know it got confusing. Dolores stepped aside, not answering, just gesturing. Rachel entered slowly, eyes flicking over the living room like she was checking for signs of neglect or bitterness. Dolores let her look. They sat. Rachel perched on the edge of the couch, still holding her bag. Dolores remained still in her armchair, mug in hand. I think we should try to move past this, Rachel said finally, smoothing her hair. Greg told me about the changes, the trust, your accounts. He's surprised, hurt even. Dolores sipped her tea. Surprised is what people are when they haven't been paying attention. Rachel's face tightened. I don't think this is fair. We've all had a rough year. The holidays are always hectic. Things slip through the cracks. Dolores tilted her head. I wasn't a crack. I was a seat at the table, one that wasn't set. Rachel looked down. It wasn't intentional. No, Dolores said, voice low. It was worse. It was convenient. Rachel blinked, thrown. So that's it? You're cutting us out? I'm cutting myself free, Dolores corrected gently. From being an obligation, a backup plan. I've played my part long enough. I'm choosing a peace. There was silence. The fireplace crackled behind them. Rachel's tone changed, trying a different angle. The kids miss you. They missed me before, Dolores replied. They just didn't know it. Rachel inhaled, frustration mounting. Greg said you were always the forgiving one. I was, Dolores said, until I realized forgiveness had become the language of their convenience. Rachel finally stood, bristling. You're not the only one who sacrificed. No, Dolores agreed. But I'm the only one who did it quietly, constantly, and without asking for anything back. Rachel opened her mouth, then shut it. She picked up her bag. I'm sorry you feel this way, she said, not meeting Dolores's eyes. Dolores stood slowly. No, you're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserve. Rachel flinched at that. She paused at the door. Greg really is worried. He should be, Dolores said calmly. Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back. The door clicked shut behind her. Dolores stood for a long moment, one hand still resting on the knob. Then she turned, went back to the kitchen, and folded the last of the towels from the dryer. That evening, as the sky faded from blue to indigo, Dolores lit the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, casting warm shadows across the living room walls. She sat on the couch with her tea, legs tucked beneath her, and let the quiet hold her like a friend. She didn't replay the conversation. She didn't try to soften it in her memory. She didn't try to fix what wasn't hers to repair. She only breathed. There would be more calls, maybe more knocks, maybe more pleas cloaked in politeness, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had learned that saying no didn't make her unkind. It made her honest, and honesty, she realized, was the gift she had always withheld from herself the most. The fire burned low. The tea cooled. The day turned over quietly into night, and Dolores, steady and whole, stayed exactly where she was, present, at peace. Enough. The phone rang at 9:12 on a Monday morning. Dolores recognized the number instantly. She let it ring until the machine picked up. Greg's voice crackled through the speaker, measured, uncertain, carefully composed. Hi, Mom, it's me. I saw the paperwork come through. The trust, the accounts. Look, I don't understand. I just want to talk. Maybe clear the air. Please call me back when you can. Love you. Click. Dolores stood in her kitchen, holding her mug, unmoving. Outside, frost edged the window glass, tracing delicate veins of winter along the pane. She didn't touch the phone. She didn't even look at it. Instead, she turned and walked to the sink, rinsed her mug, and set it gently on the rack. It rang again the next day, and the day after. Each message was a little different. Some were guilty, some defensive. One was just his breathing, like he couldn't find the words. But none of them included what mattered: acknowledgement, responsibility, truth. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Not once did he say, "We left you standing there." And so Dolores said nothing. Her silence was not a weapon, but a boundary. Not punishment, but protection. She had given them years, decades of words. Now she gave herself the quiet. On Thursday, a voicemail landed that was longer than the rest. "Mom, I just wish you'd explain. I really don't get why you're doing this. You've always been there, always supported everyone. You're the one who taught me what family means. So why now? Why this?" She sat with that message a long time, fingers resting on the kitchen table. She thought about replying. Not with anger, just with clarity. Because you don't see me. You only see what I do for you. Because I was the bridge you walked over to get to where you wanted to be. And now I've stopped laying myself down. Because I've been erased in photos you post with full captions and empty chairs. But she didn't send those words. She didn't need to. Her life, reordered, already said them for her. Instead, Dolores got dressed, wrapped her scarf around twice, and walked to the florist. She bought a small bouquet of yellow freesia and brought it home in silence. She didn't need an occasion to fill her home with softness. She had waited too long for others to invite her into joy. Now she created it for herself. At lunch, she made herself soup, lentils and carrots with a dash of rosemary, and ate slowly by the window. Her phone stayed on the table, face down. It buzzed once more, Greg again. She didn't pick up. That afternoon, she wrote in her notebook, "I used to believe that patients would eventually be rewarded, that if I just waited long enough, they would remember how much I gave. But the truth is, they didn't forget. They simply never noticed." The realization did not sting anymore. It simply settled. A quiet truth, folded gently like a clean sheet. Greg called again on Sunday night. This time, his voice trembled. "Mom, please. I know we messed up. I never thought it would come to this. Can you please just tell me what I did wrong?" Dolores sat on the porch with her tea, the message playing quietly beside her. She whispered to herself, "Not in anger, not in sadness, just truth. You edited me out for years, and now I've edited myself out of your expectations." She didn't erase the message. She didn't respond. She simply stood, walked back inside, and turned off the ringer. That night, she slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved, but because she no longer carried their confusion as her burden to unpack. The following week, Dolores received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from Greg. The handwriting was tight and tense, as if he was trying to squeeze sincerity into the lines. He wrote of childhood memories, of holidays, of how he missed Sunday breakfast and her apple jam. He wrote that he wished things were different, but still, no acknowledgement of the airport, no mention of the picture, no apology for the erasure. Dolores folded the letter and placed it in the bottom drawer of her writing desk, beneath old recipes and postcards from Ava. She didn't tear it, but she didn't reread it either. Later that day, she baked. Apple crisp, cinnamon sharp in the air. It was Ava's favorite. She wrapped half of it in foil and slipped it into a padded envelope, mailing it off with a short note. Just because. No explanation. No justification. Just care. That night, the house was still. Dolores sat by the fire, notebook open. She wrote a single line. "I am no longer a seasonal guest in my own life." Then she underlined it. Twice. Greg would call again. She knew that. Maybe in a week, maybe in a month, maybe next Thanksgiving. But now she would not wait by the phone. She would not pause her living for their learning. She had chosen freedom, chosen stillness, chosen herself. The fire crackled. The air was clean. And Dolores, surrounded by the life she built, no longer needed to explain why she had stayed silent. Her silence was not empty. It was full of answers, of dignity, of peace. A Dolores sat at the kitchen table, the same one she'd scrubbed clean for decades, now lined with folders, a steaming mug of tea, and a single blank sheet of stationery. The morning light spilled through the window, casting soft gold across the wooden grain. The fireproof box had been unlocked. Inside lay the final documents, the notarized trust, the signed amendments, and now, what she considered the most important piece, a letter. Not legal, personal. A statement of intent not required by courts, but necessary for her peace. She reached for her pen, the same one she had used to write grocery lists, condolence notes, birthday cards to Ava. It moved more slowly now, but with purpose. She wrote, "Ava, my dear, this is not an explanation. This is not an apology. This is clarity. This is choice. I chose you, not because of blood or expectation, but because of who you are. Because in the quietest ways, you saw me. You called when there was no holiday. You visited without needing an excuse. You asked how I was and waited for the full answer. You showed up because you wanted to. That's what family means to me now. Choice, respect, truth. This trust, these decisions, they are not punishment for others. They are a recognition of presence, of care returned, of love that didn't ask for receipts." Dolores stopped, sipped her tea. The steam curled like breath from a sleeping child. She thought of all the years she'd spent explaining herself, softening her edges, swallowing her hurt, performing gratefulness for scraps of attention. She continued, "I used to think love meant staying, even when forgotten, even when hurt, even when erased. But I've learned, belated but still, that love without respect isn't love. That presence without kindness isn't connection. And that being remembered out of obligation is not the same as being seen." She made a list, not for Ava, but for herself. Things I no longer owe. Apologies for taking up space. Silence when I'm hurt. Hope that someone will remember me on their own. The weight of holidays that never included me. The wait by the phone. My pie for someone else's table. She underlined the last item twice. At the bottom of the letter, she returned to Ava. "I leave you this home, this trust, this life's work, not to burden you, but to honor what you've already given freely. Love, unmeasured. I know you'll carry it well. Not perfectly, but honestly. Don't live your life waiting to be chosen, sweetheart. Choose yourself. Choose the people who don't need reminders to make room for you. Love, Grandma Dolores." She folded the letter carefully, sliding it into a crisp envelope marked simply, "For Ava." It joined the other documents, tucked beneath the layers of her clarity. She exhaled, slow and steady. The kettle whistled softly behind her. She rose to pour another cup of tea, not because anyone asked, but because the moment called. For warmth. On the fridge hung a magnet Ava had made in grade school. A tiny photo of them both, faces close, framed by pipe cleaner hearts. Dolores touched it lightly. She didn't need to be remembered like a holiday. She'd written herself into permanence, in the trust, in the letter, in the heart of the only one who ever asked, "How are you, really?" And that was enough. Finally, enough. The morning after Dolores signed the final documents, she woke to a soft sky and the scent of winter. It wasn't quite snowing yet, but the air carried that hush, the one that arrives before something beautiful. She moved slowly, not from pain, but from intention. Every step had weight, not burden. She started in the kitchen, washing the mugs, wiping down the counters, tossing the tired herbs from the windowsill and replacing them with fresh rosemary. She opened windows just long enough to let in the crisp air, then shut them with a satisfying click. The house sighed with her. Then she swept the hallway, gathered up old newspapers, found 3 unmatched socks, and laughed to herself. It felt good to laugh in an empty house. In the early afternoon, she walked to the florist 2 blocks down. The bell above the door jingled. "Something bright," she told the clerk. "Something alive." She came home with a bouquet of orange tulips, already beginning to bloom at the edges. She placed them in a chipped vase and set them by the window. For herself. Just because. That evening, Dolores cooked. Not for guests, not for family, not out of tradition or obligation, just for herself. She roasted a small chicken with garlic and lemon, mashed potatoes the way she liked them, with extra butter and a dash of cream. She steamed green beans and tossed them with slivered almonds. Nothing fancy, everything intentional. As the kitchen filled with warmth and the clinking of utensils, she set the table. A linen napkin, a candle, a glass of wine, one plate, one chair, and herself. She didn't rush. She didn't scroll. She didn't think of who wasn't there. She tasted every bite. Let the wine linger. Let the candle flicker until it bent with wax. Afterward, she cleaned up, dried each dish by hand, folded the towel with care, and stood for a moment in the kitchen doorway just breathing. This house, her house, felt different now, not fuller, but truer. Later that night, Dolores pulled out her notebook again. She turned past the pages of old grocery lists, appointment notes, the words she'd once written in anger or sorrow. She found a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, "Things I still have. My name, my tea, my hands, my garden gloves, the photo of Ava with the magnet frame, the memory of warm pie and kindness in a booth at Tina's, my breath in the cold morning, my choices, my trust, built with care, my stillness, my knowing, my peace." She stopped, stared at the list, then drew a small heart beside the final item. She tucked the notebook back into the drawer, clicked off the kitchen light, and walked slowly down the hall, the wooden floors creaking in familiar ways. In the bedroom, she slipped into her softest cardigan, the navy one that once hoped to belong, and settled beneath her quilt. Outside, the world carried on. Somewhere, someone was celebrating. Someone was forgetting, but inside this home, Dolores remembered herself, and it was enough. Finally, it was enough. Dolores stood at the window, watching the first real snow fall like quiet punctuation. It was late November, and the season had finally shifted. No more pretending. The air was crisp, honest, and tasted faintly of new beginnings. She pulled the small storage bin from the hallway closet and opened it slowly. Inside, a modest wreath with faded pine cones, a string of warm white lights, and a ceramic snowman Ava had painted in 3rd grade. Its smile was chipped, one eye faded, but still. It beamed. With careful fingers, she hung the wreath on the front door, then draped the lights around the porch railing. She didn't do it for the neighbors. She didn't do it out of nostalgia. She did it because she wanted the house to glow, for her. Back inside, the kettle hissed. Dolores poured herself tea and let the steam rise against her cheeks as she sat in the armchair by the window, a blanket around her shoulders, her navy cardigan warming her back. She no longer felt like someone waiting to be invited. She was home, whole. Just past 3, the phone rang. Ava. Dolores answered with a smile already on her lips. "Hi, Grandma." Her voice, steady, soft, familiar. "I'm on my way. The train just left. I'm bringing that silly chessboard and your favorite tea. Hope you haven't beaten me in your mind already." Dolores chuckled. "Only twice this morning." They laughed. Ava paused for a moment. Then, more quietly, "I'm coming because I need to be where I don't have to pretend. I'm coming because I want to be like you." The words hit soft and deep. Dolores swallowed against the swell in her chest. "Then come exactly as you are. You've always been enough." Another pause. "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma." Dolores leaned back, watching the snow blur the street outside. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. And happy freedom, too." They stayed on the line a while longer, neither rushing the end. When they hung up, Dolores sat in the hush. No ache, no noise, just clarity. As dusk fell, Dolores lit 2 candles on the mantel, not for tradition, for presence. She set the table again, 2 plates this time, one for herself, one for Ava. No turkey, no stuffing. Just lentil stew, warm bread, and that old ceramic snowman smiling at them from the counter. She moved through the house slowly, smoothing pillowcases, fluffing the guest bed, lighting a lavender candle in the hallway. Each act a declaration, "I am here." At 6:47 p.m., headlights swept across the front yard. Dolores stepped onto the porch. Ava emerged from the cab, canvas bag over her shoulder, cheeks pink from the cold. She didn't run this time. She walked straight into Dolores's arms and held her tight. Inside, they shed layers and sat close. Dinner was simple. The conversation was not. They spoke of small fears and quiet hopes, of hard choices and healing. Dolores didn't offer advice, she offered space. Later, as they washed dishes, side by side, Ava looked at her and said, "You know, I think this is the kind of tradition I want. Just this. Just truth." Dolores smiled. No better place to begin. That night they sat under the soft glow of string lights, Ava wrapped in a shawl, Dolores with her hands wrapped around her tea. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, everything was lit from within. And in that quiet, Dolores knew. This year, she didn't carve a turkey. She carved out space, for herself, for truth, for the granddaughter who saw her. And that was enough. That was everything.